Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Pierce, and I'm the director of the Transnational Literature Series at Brookline Booksmith, just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and your host for tonight's conversation. The Transnational Series focuses on stories of migration, the intersection of politics and literature, and works in translation. The series was launched in early 2018, and while we miss having in-person events at the store, we love having this opportunity to connect with you all virtually. I just want to offer a quick Zoom webinar tutorial. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a few icons. One of those is a Q&A icon where you can enter in your questions at any time during the conversation. Another button will get you to the chat window. That space is there for you all. Please feel free to chat during the event. My colleague Ashley will be in the chat as well, dropping in useful information, including links to books by our authors. We do make every effort to keep these events free to attend in the hopes that you'll purchase the featured books from us. So thank you in advance for taking a look and supporting independent bookstores. And finally, you can see us, but we can't see you, so relax and please enjoy the conversation. Tonight, I have the honor of introducing Mohamed Kheir and Robin Moger. Mohamed is a novelist, poet, short story writer, journalist, and lyricist. He has received the Sawiris Cultural Award for both of his short story collections and the Egyptian Ministry of Cultural Award for poetry. Slipping is his second novel and his first to be translated into English. He lives in Egypt. Robin Moger is a translator of Arabic to English, currently based in Cape Town, South Africa. His translations of prose and poetry have appeared in Black Box Manifold, The White Review, Tentacular, Asymptote, Words Without Borders, Seedings, The Johannes Review of Books, The Washington Square Review, and others. He has translated several books into English, including Iman Mursal's How to Mend and Yusuf Raqa's The Crocodiles, among others. And tonight's moderator, Yasmine El Rashidi, is the author of The Battle for Egypt, Dispatches from the Revolution, and Chronicle of the Last Summer, a novel of Egypt. She is a regular contributor to the New York Review of Books and is an editor of the Middle East Arts and Culture Quarterly, Beidoun. She lives in Cairo. And finally, thank you to Afaf El-Goshman, who will be here interpreting tonight's event for us. I'm so thrilled to have them here tonight in conversation. And now, Mohamed, Robin, and Yasmine.
Is everyone on? Yep.
Yes.
Well, thank you. We can't see you all, but thank you everyone for tuning in and being a part of this. I want to also thank the Center for the Art of Translation for hosting this event and Two Lines Press for publishing this novel. It is quite a feat to be published as an Egyptian writer, whether you're writing in English or Arabic, anywhere in the world. I think especially to be published in translation, and both the Center for the Art of Translation and Two Lines Press are champions to this. And so I'm grateful that they asked me to do this, that they invited me. I'm new to Mohamed's work, but I'm a fan. I love this novel. I've read it 3 times. Each time I get more out of it. And I'm a long time admirer of Robin's. So it really is a privilege to be doing this. Slipping, hard to describe. Safe, one of the protagonists, is a struggling journalist. He is introduced to a source for a story, who is a former exile with a sort of an expansive knowledge of the country's obscure, unknown, magical, mystical spaces. And they take us on this journey together. We step into this world with them. We slip in into all these spaces that are hidden from the from the plain sight, sort of. It's a world that's fragmented, it's elusive, it's magical, it's bizarre. You go to a neighborhood where these giant flowers rain from the sky. There's a spot on the Nile where you supposedly can walk on water. And together Bahr and Saif explore the country and sort of chase these stories that they've heard of. They chase these mirages and these dreams, and eventually turning inwards on everyday life. And for Saif, who's thoughtful, perhaps a little melancholic, he begins through this journey to piece together his own past, to answer questions that are unresolved. For example, why he lost his lover, Alia, who's also a character throughout the book. And in some way, his traumas, his losses, they mirror that of the country and the revolution, which is always sort of at the background to this novel. Love and revolution and loss they're sort of interchangeable for each other. So that's probably not succinct, but it is the most succinct, brief description I can give of the book. Also fleeting. The novel is meandering, it's elliptical, it's magical, it leaves you in the space between a dreamland and waking life, somewhere between fact and fiction. Mohamed, you leave us very much in the space between, the everyday and a possible other, and very much between sort of fact and fiction. Often in reading the book, one isn't entirely sure where one stands, and you learn later where you were then. So I'd love for you to describe, your book to the audience, to start with, this magical world that you created, which is many, many worlds that make this whole.
Hello everyone, hello to the audience, my fellows, Robin. I can't describe my novel I will speak Arabic now. Okay. هي رواية عن سيف، شاب مصري صحفي. هو شاب يعني ممكن نصفه بأنه شاب غير متحمس، غير مؤمن بالثورة أو بالثورات. بيخوض تجربة الثورة بضغط من شركته من حبيبته، وبيفقدها خلال هذه العملية بشكل ما.
It's a story about a young Egyptian man who's timid and quite unenthusiastic about the revolution. Basically, he doesn't believe in the revolution, but he goes through that experience, and during that experience, he loses his love.
بعد ذلك الرواية بتحكي قصته بعد ما بيفقد حبه أو حبيبته بشكل ما، يعني بنكتشف الشكل اللي فقط بحبيبته خلال الرواية، وبيقابل ضيف غريب بيعرفه على موطنه بشكل تاني مختلف، بيعرفه على أماكن كانت قدام عينيه طول الوقت لكنه بيشوفها بشكل تاني مع الضيف الغريب اللي بيقابله.
Mohamed.
And the story.
Oh, can I interrupt? Sorry, everyone. Mohamed, we do have many Arabic speakers in the audience and they can't hear you. Can you speak a little louder? Yes, thank you. Sorry, everyone.
So the story of the novel takes off after that, basically after he loses his love. Muhammad meets this unusual creature that introduces him in a different way to his homeland. He brings his homeland in a different way, introduces him to places that he never saw.
هو أيضا كاتب، وفي لحظة من اللحظات قد يختلط الأمر علينا يعني كمتلقين للرواية، إذا كان هو بيخوض المغامرات دي فعلا ولا هو بيكتب خيال هو بيتخيله أو بيتصوره.
and Saif is a writer in the novel, so sometimes it might be for us that we think he is not going through these events himself, but rather imagining them and writing them in a form of fiction.
الأماكن شبه الخيالية أو الغرائبية اللي هو بيزورها مع الضيف الغريب كلها أماكن يعني تبدو أنها خيالية لكنها تصلح لأن تكون واقعية بشكل ما. كل الأماكن كده.
The strange or the magical places that Saif imagines and sees, although they can seem imaginative to us, they can actually be quite realistic and we can quite think of them as real.
معظم اوكي اخر جمله معظم الاماكن دي
معلش محمد سؤال بس when you were talking to me just on that point in the structure of the novel is that you start out with disjointed stories and you don't know how they relate and they all seem strange and magical, but when I was talking to you, you told me that's how the novel came to you. Real things that happened. Lots of these strange stories actually happen to you in reality. The building, yes, the flowers, these things are based on real events. And that's how the novel came to you as well. You started with the stories.
Yes, كل الأماكن الغرائبية في الرواية كلها أماكن موجودة في الواقع و90% منها أنا خضت الخبرة دي بنفسي. هي مش مجرد أماكن اخترعتها لكنها أماكن موجودة في الحقيقة وأنا شفتها بنفسي في مصر وحبيت أن أكتبها في الرواية بهذه الطريقة وأحطها في نسق معين يبدو متعلق بقصة واحدة.
So Mohamed wants to add that these places that were magical were actually places that he himself has visited and has seen and lived through experiences in them in Egypt, and he wanted to put them in his novel.
وأستطيع أن أدل القارئ عليها إذا أردت.
And that he can guide the readers to these actual places if they want.
I mean, I think it's maybe a good time just to give the audience a sense of all this that we're talking about. Just with that in your minds, I think Mohamed's first going to read from the Arabic, and then Robin will read from his translation. Just a section to give you a sense of these two characters going to one of these places together. You'll get a sense of the experience, a little bit of the description, and also the sound, because this novel is quite musical. So I think we'll start with Mohamed.
Okay, it's Robin choose the both verses. Okay.
Yeah. So this is it's chapter 6. Is it? Sorry, I don't know.
Yes, the title is بقرة بيضاء في حجم الكف.
بس هنبتدي من ويلتقط بحر أنفاسه.
ويلتقط بحر أنفاسه في اللحظة التي وجدنا فيها أنفسنا أمام الحائط الذي سعينا إليه. لم يكن سوى جدار معبد قديم امحت الرسومات الملكية لكن بقايا ظلالها ما زالت تشي بطبيعة المكان. مع الفجر صعدت معه طريقا غير ممهد وسط خضرة شيطانية مبعثرة. ارتفعنا مع الجبل وانخفض النيل الذي عبرناه كأولياء وظل خلفنا عريضا ساكنا لا يتدخل. أحاطه من الجهتين شريط ضيق من نخيل عال وأعشاب لم أعرف كنهها. وحين بدأنا نلهث ظهرت فجأة من بين ثنايا الحجر الجبلي فتحة لا تكاد تدخل رجلا بالغا، ومن الفتحة أشارت لنا أصابع من الداخل فانحنينا ودخلنا. ظننت أننا داخلان مكانا صامتا ففوجئت بالحركة والأصوات تسري فيه. اعتادت عيناي بالتدريج الإضاءة الصباحية المتسللة، ورأيت حشدا جالسا معظمه نسوة وأطفال، وشممت رائحة بخور، وارتفعت الشمس بحذر يسبقها شعاعها ككشاف ماهر، فأنار جدارا ناصعا في الواجهة خاليا تقريبا من الرسومات، ثم اندلع الغناء فجأة. انطلق المديح النبوي والتواشيح والأذكار، ترددت بلا صدى وبدت غريبة في الجو الفرعوني، وسرعان ما صمت حشد النسوة والأطفال، وبقيت الأهازيج تتردد والتعاويذ تتابع مرتجفة، وحدق الجميع في الجدار كأنما في شاشة سينما، وحدقت مثلهم. هنا علاج المحرومين من الرؤى والفاشلين في الاستخارة. الجدار المخفي سر هذه البلدات المتلاصقة، لا تبوح به لأحد، لا يبدو للأغراب إلا جدارا مجرفا منهوبا محطما. أما لأهل هذه القرى وفي دقائق بعينها بين الفجر والضحى، في صباحات بعينها مبروكة يعلن عنها القمر، تستطيع إن كنت مؤمنا وكنت صادقا وكنت محبا أن ترى من تريد. حدق جيدا وصل على الأنبياء، فإذا كنت مفعما بإيمانك فسترى المحبين واضحين أو في غمامة شفافة، ستراهم رأي العين أو يتجسدون في المخيلة، سيسلمون عليك أو يرشدونك أو يطمئنونك. حدق أولا في الجدار حتى تبيض عيناك وتطرفان وتدمعان. وبدأنا نسمع النهنهة من حولنا، وأصوات النسوة يغمغمن بأسماء، وزحف طفل صغير تحت قدمي حيث جلسنا القرفصاء. ملست شعره بكفي وأدهشتني خشونته، ثم عدت أستند إلى الجدار وأنظر، وقلت إذا كان هؤلاء يرون من فارقوا هنا فأنا أولى منهم وأدرى برؤية الموتى. حدقت حتى احترق جفني، رأيت ليلا سرعان ما تبينت فيه كلبا أسود يتحرك في الظلام، تبعه كلب آخر ثم ثالث، حتى صاروا 5 كلاب. وقفوا جميعا على ناصية شارع بدت لي مألوفة، ثم تحركوا بسرعة يقودهم الكلب الأول بانتظام كأنما فرقة عسكرية، ووصلوا إلى مدخل بناية، مدخل جعلني أنتفض في مكاني، أو هكذا شعرت. كانت تلك بنايتنا القديمة، بناية اللهو والأمان. ورأيت الكلاب ال5 تصعد السلالم حتى الدور الرابع حيث كنا نسكن، نتوقف أمام باب شقتنا لبرهة قبل أن يبدأ الكلب الأول في عواء غريب، سرعان ما تبعته الكلاب الأخرى. ثم تذكرت، رأيت وتذكرت.
هايل شكرا يا معن. هايل.
It's your turn or what?
Yeah, and Robin will now, when he's ready, will read from the translation that he so beautifully wrote.
So this is from a chapter called A White Cow the Size of a Hand. And it goes as follows. As Bahr paused, we found ourselves approaching the wall that was our destination. An old temple wall, its reliefs worn smooth, but still, with their ghostly traces, speaking of the site's original purpose. Dawn was breaking as we climbed a rough track through thickets of scrub. We rose with the hillside, the Nile we had crossed like saints, falling away behind us, broad and still and unobtrusive, its banks lined with a thin strip of palms and indeterminate foliage. Just as we were beginning to pant, there suddenly was an opening in the slope's rocky folds, scarcely large enough to let a grown man through, and in this opening, from within, fingers beckoned. So we bent and entered. I had been expecting quiet, and the voices and blur of movement took me by surprise. When my eyes adjusted to the light, I saw a large group seated on the ground, most of them women and children, and caught the scent of incense in the air. Overhead, the sun was rising shyly, preceded by its rays, which, an expertly placed spotlight, fell against a bright and almost blank white wall. The singing began. Praise songs for the prophet, prayers, God's names, all sounded echoless and somehow out of keeping in this ancient space. And then the women and children fell silent, though their chants and charms continued to tremble in the air. Everyone was staring at the wall, as though they were at the movies, and I stared with them. Here was the cure for those who were denied visions, for those whose supplications fell flat. The wall was the secret these clustered hamlets never divulged. To strangers, This was nothing but a scored and pillaged ruin. But for these people, for the few minutes between dawn and sunup on those blessed mornings following the full moon nights, you could, if a true believer and full of love, see the one you sought. Look closely then, and pray hard to the prophets. And when your faith is brimming over, then you'll see them, the beloved dead, clear as day or through a veil, held by your eye or embodied in your mind. They will greet you or guide you or reassure you. Look at the wall till your eyes go white with it, till they blink and tear. We began to hear muffled weeping around us and the sound of the women murmuring names. As I sat cross-legged, a little boy crawled past my foot, and I leaned forward to brush his hair. It startled me with its coarseness. Then I leaned back against the wall. I told myself that if these people were able to see their departed here in this place, then surely so should I. And I stared until my eyes burned, and I saw. I saw night, and in that night, the form of a black dog moving through the darkness. It was followed by a second dog, then a third, then two more until there were 5. 5 dogs standing on a street corner I thought I recognized, and now on the move, trotting quickly in formation toward the entrance to a building like a military patrol, an entrance that made me sit up straight. It was the apartment building I had grown up in, my place of play and sanctuary. I saw the 5 dogs pad up the stairs to the 5th floor where we'd lived, and pause for a moment outside our apartment. And then I heard the first dog howl, quickly joined by the others. Then I remembered. I saw and I remembered.
Thank you. So just so the audience knows, I have not read the Arabic. I got hold of the book just a few days ago, but just hearing these two, and it's the first time I hear it in Arabic in the full, there are differences. I mean, it's not just obviously, I mean, it's obviously a literary translation, so the sentences do take on what is their own cadence. But there are also sort of slight differences of description, and I'm wondering obviously about how you found each other, what the relationship is. You know, it's there's poetic license.
In this, we'll speak for in this passage especially, which actually after we'd chosen it, I suddenly wondered whether that might be an issue. But this passage, at least at the beginning of this passage, the major difference, I think, comes at the beginning of the passage when, or rather the beginning of the passage gives a good example of a sort of a technical change to reset what's happening, because the Arabic ويلتقط بحرا فاسو would be Bahr drew breath or caught his breath in the instant that we found ourselves before the wall that we were making for. That's how it would begin. The passage comes after a long story told by Bahr. So he's been speaking, and we don't know where they are, but they've been moving, we suddenly discover. And they find themselves apparently before the wall that they're making their way towards. However, this is immediately followed by a passage in which we have a description of them walking up the hillside towards a rocky slope that they have to pass through to find themselves in front of the wall. So there's a slight problem, there's a continuity issue there, which you could only resolve as a reader by thinking perhaps what's happened is that Bahr has been talking as they've walked through that entrance and found themselves in front of the wall, and then we're having a reprise, but it isn't clear. And so to eliminate that possible confusion in the English, when writing it in the English, it became clear that that wasn't going to, it didn't sound quite right, or was possibly confusing. And so that was maybe normalized into having Bahr pause, and then they look up the slope to see the place that they're going to, and then they walk up the slope and approach it. And so that kind of change sometimes happens. Yeah.
I mean, it's not as straightforward. The novel is, and you spoke about this a little sort of just before the reading, is the novel, the form of the novel is very interesting in that it is these sections that they aren't constrained by time, and that you learn things like you feel at times you're in the present, but actually you learn later on that you were in a dream, or maybe you were in a dream, or and so the book is all these little sections that somehow come together eventually into this whole, and along the way things explain themselves. So you can read these sections in and of themselves, but you know, but together they form this bigger story. It's not a, I mean, I can't imagine that it's straightforward. I can't imagine it was easy to write, let alone translate.
Well, I just wanted to say something about this passage, and about how, just very briefly, that might help explain. So I first got hold of this book from the publisher Karam Yusuf. So I have translated some of Mohammed's short stories before, and for myself, I was a huge admirer of Mohammed as a short story writer, and I didn't even know about his first novel. I think I just loved him as a short story writer. And Karam Yusuf, the publisher, told me she was about to bring out a novel by Mohammed. So she sent me the book, and I started translating before it came out. And this is the first passage I translated. And I was translating bits of the book for myself, actually, and really not thinking about translating it as a project. But as time went on, but this was the first one I did. And it stayed more or less how I translated it the first time. Very sort of tonal and impressionistic, and about voices, because I was confused also reading the book for the first time. I was in a sort of a bit of a delirium at the beginning of it, like in a happy way, a happy confusion. And this was the passage that came to me, and I only contacted Mohammed later when I had it developed and asked his permission. That was around the time the book came out.
Well, it does. The novel does put you in a bit of a delirium, because it's so. I mean, you know, when I think of it, it's so many writers I admire come together in this thing that's entirely its own. And on the one hand, as someone who lived through, you know, the revolution and like everything it brought, including, you know, falling in love and out of love, and it works its way into you in this way that you really aren't entirely sure where you are, and then things become very clear, and it's very freeing also. So it's interesting that you chose, I mean, this was something you sort of took on for yourself. And then how did you, I mean, you approached Mohammed, and what is the relationship, I mean, you know, between you? And that, I mean, I remember when my novel was being translated, because the novel had come to me in English, and I wrote it in English, and the sound of it, you know, and the atmosphere of it were entirely in English. I didn't, by the time it was done, I was so done with it, I couldn't even think of like the Arabic. But I mean, in this case, you know, Mohammed, did you have ideas of sort of what you wanted? Did you work closely together? It's so musical, the English, it's really beautiful. And what I heard of the Arabic also, it's a different musicality.
It's musical in Arabic too. I heard that. يعني القراء العرب برضو شايفينها كده، وكمان القراءة هي مش يعني قد تكون صعبة القراية بالإنجليزي شوية، لكن وهي كمان مش سهلة القراءة بالعربي يعني.
The Arab, yeah.
He admits that neither is easy to read in English or Arabic.
Yeah, the Arab, Muhammad said that the Arab readers also viewed it that way. It's musical in Arabic, musical English, but the Arab readers told him it wasn't an easy read.
فربما هي يعني الرواية كانت بتبحث عن القارئ الخاص بتاعها، وعلشان كده كانت بالنسبة لي شيء غريب إنها تكون أول كتاب ليا يترجم، لأنه قد يكون الأكثر خصوصية.
Muhammad views it as a novel that's in search for a reader that will get it, and for that reason he finds it strange that it's the first work that he does that's getting translated.
أنا كان عندي قصتين قبل كده زي ما قال روبن، ما كنتش أعرف روبن خالص، هو ترجمهم من مجموعتي السابقة كان اسمها رمش العين.
I had stories I published before that, as Robin said, and then Robin has translated them without me knowing. They are part of a collection titled رمش العين, the eyelash.
وبعدين لما أصدرت إفلات الأصابع سليبنج، ناشرتي الرائعة والشجاعة كرم يوسف قالت لي إن مترجم روبن مهتم إنه يترجمها بالإنجليزي، ولقيت روبن بيبعت لي فعلا الجزء الأول من الرواية، وكان ده محل سعادة كبيرة ليا لأن كنت مبسوط بترجمة القصتين السابقتين.
حبيبي.
And when I published Slipping, the wonderful friend of mine, Karam Youssef, told me that there's a translator named Robin who's interested. And indeed, Robin contacted me and sent me the first chapter translated. And I was very pleased with that.
I'm just going to intervene here quickly, just to sort out, because I got my professional credentials and ethics. So Mohamed did know I'd translate. He did know me. Like, I did contact him about the stories. So he knew me, but he didn't know me, right? I would say that. He knew me, but he didn't. He knew I'd translated the stories, but then we hadn't been in contact at all. And also, I sprung the book on him. I kind of gave him the book once I translated it. So that's also not fair on Mohamed. Anyway.
الكلام عن اختلاف العربي والإنجليزي، كان في مترجمة هي مصرية ويعني مصرية وأجنبية في نفس الوقت، كانت عرضت عليا في الأول أول ما أصدرت الرواية إنها تترجمها للإنجليزي، وكان عندي موافقة مبدئية، بس بعدين لما عرفت إن روبن عايز يترجمها أنا اعتذرت منها، لأن كنت عارف إنه إذا كان الكاتب إنجليزي هيحقق كمان الترجمة الصحيحة أكتر يعني.
And beforehand, there was an Egyptian, I would say English-speaking Egyptian translator who proposed that she translates my novel, and I gave her a preliminary permission. But then when I knew about Robin's intention to translate it, I preferred to give him that permission, because writing in a native language is definitely needed to get the novel translated the way I wanted it to be.
أنا كنت يعني كنت واثق قد إيه روبن مترجم رائع، وكمان ما إنجليش يعني ما تسمحليش إني يعني أحكم كتير على الترجمة عنده، بس كنت مبسوط وأنا بقرأ الفصول اللي بيبعتها لي. كمان أدركت مع العملية دي قد إيه الترجمة يعني العمل المترجم فعلا على قد ما هو بيعبر عن العدم الأصلي، بس كمان هو جهد مختلف تماما ونص يكاد يكون مختلف.
And I knew that Robin will do a great job. I read and I judged, even though I don't have a full command of English, I was able to judge the translated part he sent me as good translation. And while I admit that translation sometimes, takes away a little bit from the original work, but translation in itself is a great effort and is a lot of work, and I found it really beautiful.
وأدركت كمان خلال العملية دي قد إيه في طبقات مختلفة داخل كل لغة، يعني من الصعب إن احنا ننقل جميع الطبقات كلها، لكن أعتقد إن القارئ الإنجليزي يقدر يحكم أكتر مني على الترجمة.
And I also admit that there are different layers within the one language, and sometimes a translated word cannot convey these different layers. That said, I believe the English speaker and the English reader is capable more of judging the translation than me.
And what was I'm curious about actually the dialogue between you in terms of, I mean, I remember when we were translating my novel, which was different and that was from English into Arabic, there were, the concerns were, a sensitivity, cultural sensitivity, and, the possibility of censorship, and these slight also adjustments or amendments to cater to the audience that it was coming to and the sort of socio-political context that it was coming to. In this case, obviously, it's going the other way, but there were these moments that struck me, very few, but, where it felt like there was this cultural context that I wondered if it had originally been in the Arabic or if it was added into the English. And without maybe even going into specifics, like I'm curious about, the translation process into the English. What are the concerns? What are the issues that you were thinking about? Were there constraints or pressures in that way?
As a translator?
As a translator, and then for the two of you in conversation with one another. And is there a relationship through this with the publisher, or is it just between the two of you?
It's a really complicated issue, or it's rather a sort of like there's potentially a kind of terrifyingly long answer there, which I'm not going to do because I got 20 minutes in me at least about that. But it involves everybody. It involves the. First of all, I think the first thing to mention is the way this came into English is that I basically translated it.
The whole thing?
Well, sort of more or less, yeah, on spec. Okay. And I don't do it on the metaphor. It's like something I do in my sort of spare time. Like I was reading the book and I loved it, and it's a way of reading it. And now I've got the habit of doing it as a translator anyway. I was translating it here and there, and I saw a lot of similarities in things I tried to do with Mohamed's prose in his short stories, which I would recommend anyone in Cairo, for example, who hasn't got Rimsh al-Ain as a collection of short stories. It's a beautiful collection of short stories, really extraordinary and not talked about enough, and very mysterious and magical and powerful. I loved it, and a lot of the themes in that at least reoccur in the book. So I was thinking about translation when I started, and then the book was produced. And so a lot of my dialogue with Mohamed was retroactive. I'd done it. I was happy with what I'd done, or at least I think I shaped the text the way that I thought it should be, or that made sense to me. But then I would work back and talk to Mohamed only after 2 lines took it. And that was another thing that was very surprising. I mean, maybe another moment to do this in the conversation, but I'd just like to say, the experience of working with 2 lines has been truly extraordinary. It's been amazing. They've, and especially the editor of the English edition, someone called CJ Evans, who I've never met or spoken to, but we've corresponded obviously as an editor. He was just amazing about that. And one of the things about this book is he didn't, at no point did they really try and intrude. There aren't really that many glosses in the text to explain what's going on. And especially they didn't really come from the editing at all. CJ would always ask, I mean, I don't know if he's here. I hope he is, in which case I can say thank you very much. But he always asked and was super clear about when he didn't understand or wanted clarification, but he didn't leap ahead of that. He wanted to see what would become of it. It was an extraordinary experience. And his real quality was that he was kind of right most of the time, but didn't make me feel wrong, which is very nice. It's like, it was amazing. And so this is a text that's complex, but not because it's local or it contains references that are not there to be got. And I think one of the dangers is often to gloss references in a text, to explain them in the text, to make the fact that you've explained them obvious, because they can often break the tone of the text when explanations exist that don't belong there, telling you what a city is or what a street is or what a thing is. They clearly can't exist in the original text, and the reader will feel that, the reader will know that. The minute you've done that, you break something about the aesthetic of the text or the poetics of the text. And so by and large, that hasn't happened. And you hope a reader will accept a lot of those things. And I don't think that's where the complexity lies anyway. But anyway, just to wrap up, so my main interaction with Mohamed came at the end of the text, and especially in something that also came from 2 lines, which was a suggestion that we do an interview with each other or a correspondence with each other about the process of translation and about the book. And we had a long email correspondence then, sort of formalized, like a conceit. And that was one of the best things about translating the book. It was lovely. It was a wonderful experience. And I learned a lot in retrospect. I was able to say what I felt about the book to Mohamed, and he could say where it came from. It was lovely. Anyway.
And speaking of where it came from, as you say, the complexity of it is not in context or references. The complexity of it is absolutely in form, and it's entirely its own thing. I can think of many, writers I admire, a lot from Latin America, interestingly, who write, who have this, genius at conjuring these seemingly disparate parts and sections that eventually form this whole and explain themselves. And to me, it's interesting when I think of this novel, I know everyone always wants to know where it fits in the canon, things fit in the canon of, Egyptian literature or literature from the region. But to me, this novel somehow fits, it's on another level. I feel it's, it really is out there with.
Could I ask a question here?
Sure.
Yes, you said that. I've been thinking this, and I have a question I'd like to ask Mohamed. So I'm going to ask it in English so people can understand, and maybe Afef, you can translate for Mohamed, just if it's. But one of the things in the book, in the Arabic, and is that it also references a lot of different styles and registers of Egyptian writing, especially like the idea that, so some sections are very poetic, or you'll have a section that is very surreal but also detailed, like the scene of an entire government bureaucracy designed to waste people's time. That's a whole genre in Egyptian writing. Ibrahim Farghali has written books about this. Ibrahim Farghali had a book about Naguib Mahfouz's novels disappearing and everything like that. It feels like that kind of writing, but then you will suddenly switch and go to another kind of writing. So it seems to me also you're playing with a lot of different forms of Egyptian literature as well over the past 20 or 30 years, this kind of thing. And then suddenly one sentence, sorry, I'm sorry, sorry.
روبن سأل محمد سؤال حول الأنماط الأدبية أو الأشكال الأدبية التي تطرق لها محمد في كتابته. أشار لها بالريفرنسز، المراجع، registers اللي هي تعتبر نوع من اللغة أو نوع من الأشكال الأدبية. في بعض الأحيان كانت أدبية وشعرية، وفي بعض الأحيان كانت سريالية. هنالك مشهد مفصل للبيروقراطية المصرية، والكاتب إبراهيم فرغلي سلط الضوء على هذا النوع من الأشكال الأدبية في أدبه. لكن فجأة أيضا في الكتاب نرجع إلى أنماط أخرى. فما تعليقك على هذا الشأن؟
بس أنا لا أعتبر نفسي ابن الأدب المصري فقط. فأنا سمعت ياسمين أظن كانت بتتكلم عن أمريكا اللاتينية كمان، ويمكن تقصد الأماكن السحرية أو الواقعية السحرية. يعني انا ببص يعني ما بقدرش اشاور وانا بتكلم عن افلات الاصابع عن مرجعيات معينه في الادب المصري بعينها، يعني في الادب المصري او العالمي. ستوب هير وكمل.
لا ما
ولا
هو ده
كمل. اوكي.
my question برضه، يعني هو خلط.
نعم مظبوط مظبوط. لكن في كل الحالات انا بعتبر شكل طورت او اتمنى اني استطيع اطوره من التجربه السابقه في مجموعه رمش العين، وهي ان احنا بنتكلم عن ان الواقع والسحر الاثنين موجودين بنفس القدر. يعني يعني احنا مش بنتكلم عن الشخص اللي بيعيش مثلا تقريبا للابد زي 100 عام من العزله عند ماركيز مثلا، او الشخص اللي بتاخده العاصفه وبتطير الى اخره. احنا بنتكلم عن اماكن موجوده فعلا في حياتنا اليوميه، لكنها سحريه بنفس القدر الواقعي اللي هي موجوده فيه. ده الشكل اللي انا حاولت ابقى موجود، يعني انتهجه في افلات الاصابع او اطوره في افلات الاصابع في الجزء الخاص. طيب اقف هنا واكمل.
So Muhammad does not consider himself as only representative or only hailing from the Egyptian literature, as Yasmine talked about the American Latin, and I believe she mentioned the magical realism of Latin American literature. For me, I can't.
I didn't necessarily mean magic realism, but I'll get to that.
Or yeah. So Muhammad wants also to add that he cannot pinpoint or cannot refer to one reference in the Egyptian literature that he used or thought about. There is a mixture, and Robin added to that. But in any case, Muhammad believes that he wanted to develop and build on the previous experience of Rimsh al-Ain, which is blending and bringing to light the magic and the reality, as both of them are equally present in our life. He doesn't want to paint a picture of life that goes forever, as the 100 year of solitude for Marquise, or the tempest, the storm. Muhammad is talking more about actual places that exist in daily life. They are magical, and that's the trick that he wants to work on.
بالنسبة للجزء الخاص بالبيروقراطية في الرواية اللي اتكلم عنه روبن، المفروض إن الحكومة بتلاقي إن المواطنين عندهم فراغ كبير، وبتعمل عملية حسابية، بتضرب رقم الفراغ عند كل مواطن في عدد السكان، فبتكتشف إن في فائض من الوقت كبير جدا. بتخشى إن الفائض ده يتحول لتهديد سياسي، فبتحاول إنها تخلي حياتهم أكتر يعني استهلاكا ومللا علشان يستهلكوا الوقت الفائض ده. الفكرة دي بعناصرها كلها موجودة في الواقع، ما هيش حقيقية يعني بالمعنى الواقعي يعني، بس هي موجودة بالمعنى المجازي، وبعض الناس بتؤمن بيها بأشكال مختلفة كمان، يعني مش من ناحية الوقت، لكن من ناحية استهلاك الإنسان عشان ما يفكرش غير في حياته اليومية.
So the scene on the bureaucracy in Egypt, where Muhammad wants to paint this picture of how the government finds out that the people are free and they have a lot of free time, so they multiply the amount of free time and leisure people have times the population, and that they find out that people have a life full of consumption and leisure, and they want to fill that. So this idea might seem unreal, because it's kind of magical, but in fact it can exhibit itself or shows itself in a different way in reality, and metaphorically it's accurate in some way. So some people would believe in this or believe in it in different way.
في بعض الأحداث في الرواية ما كانتش موجودة، يعني دي من الوقائع الغريبة شوية، ما كانتش موجودة لما كتبت الرواية، لكنها اتحققت بعدها وبعض الصحفيين أشاروا إليها. في مشهد في الرواية الحكومة بتطور في أحد المناطق، بتبدأ تعمل لها تجديد، وعايزاها تكون شبه أوروبا، لكن بتلاقي إن ما ينقصها هم الرسامين أو اللي بيتسولوا نقود والفنانين اللي بيتسولوا نقود في الميادين، فبتستأجر ناس عشان يأدوا الوظيفة دي وبتدفع لهم مرتب عشان يبدوا فنانين تلقائيين في الميدان الجديد. بعد إصدار الرواية بعدة شهور المشهد ده حصل فعلا في الواقع، وأحد الأصدقاء والزملاء الصحفيين صوره واتكلم عنه ومنشن الرواية إن كان بيفتتحوا منطقة جديدة في وسط البلد، وبالفعل جابوا رسامين وجابوا كذا، هم مش جايين بشكل تلقائي عشان يبقى المنظر كأنه أوروبا.
There are some scenes in the novel that did not exist before, and I imagined them. And they, as some journalists have pointed, they have been realized afterwards. I'll give an example of that, which is a scene in a novel where the government intends to sort of reinvent, renovate some places, and they want these places to look like Europe, including beggars or like street beggars, street artists, and musicians, and for that end, they actually hire people who sound like beggars and put them in these places. Afterwards, and in reality, when the government was opening some place in downtown, they actually hired actual people to do that kind of job and to sound more like Europe.
Mohamed, if I could just sort of come in and ask, I mean, it's interesting how it came to you in that, you know, you talk of having written things that then came true, and people noted that, you know, and referenced the book. But it sounds to me, I mean, it almost sounds like you received this book in parts, almost visually as whole parts, and that I'm curious about that, and also I'm just going to start picking up on questions from the audience. There a lot of people are asking about your influences in terms of whether this, you know, sort of dreamlike state that you've created, and if there are particular literary influences that came to you as you were writing.
طيب أنا هسمع من الضيف عشان
نعم. ياسمين سألت عن الأفكار التي تطرقت لها والتي خطرت على بالك وأتت إليك ربما على شكل دفعات بشكل منفصل، ولكنها يعني كالإيحاء وصلت إليك. أيضا يسألون بعض الحضور هنا يسأل عن التأثير، ما الذي أثر عليك وشكل هذه المسيرة؟
أوكي، أنا يعني I believe it's one question، يعني هو the sentence. Okay. ازاي بتيجي؟ طبعا الافكار، هذا بيقولوا سؤال المليون دولار، ازاي بتيجي الافكار؟ بتيجي هي اللي يعني هي اللي بتعرف مين الكاتب ومين غير الكاتب، بقد ايه بتجيله افكار وازاي بيقدر يعبر عنها. في افكار بتيجي عن طريق يعني بتخطر لك فجأة وانت ماشي، بس كلها وخيالك بيشتغل عليها. مثلا الزهور العملاقة اللي في الرواية دي زهور حقيقية، بس هي في الحقيقة موجودة في إندونيسيا مش في مصر يعني، لكن في الرواية كان خليتها في أحد المناطق اللي بيسكن فيها الأثرياء، واللي هم فعلا بينجوا من العقاب يعني لو إذا تسببوا في حادثة أو بأخرى. كمان طيب هقف هنا واكمل. اوكي.
Responding to Yasmin's question about how does he receive these ideas that also kind of like take shape in reality and comes to effect, Mohamed responded to that by saying that as any writer, these ideas define how you proceed about them. They basically define if you are a writer or not. Sometimes they come by coincidence while you're walking. Sometimes your imagination works on them. For instance, the scene of the giant flowers, they exist, and they really exist in Indonesia, right? Indonesia. But in the novel, I set them out to be in rich neighborhoods in a way to see what, to show what rich people are capable of.
كمان تجربة الثورة نفسها أنا كنت خضتها، وكثير من المشاهد حتى لو ظهرت بشكل عابر في الرواية أنا عشتها في الحقيقة. وأعتقد إن هي يعني ظهرت في الرواية بشكل حقيقي. حتى العمارة اللي في الرواية اسمها عمارة الضوضاء، العمارة اللي جنبها الفندق الكبير اللي بيتبني، أنا سكنت فيها فعلا في الحقيقة. فهل القصص دي جات لي أو الحكايات الرواية بشكل منفصل؟ في كتير من الأوقات جات بشكل منفصل، دي الحقيقة يعني. بس نسجتها في الرواية بشكل إن بعض الناس شافوا إن قوة النسيج ما كانتش كافية جدا يعني. بعض الناس شافوها لا منتظمة، بس دي آراء يعني مختلفة، بحترم الاثنين يعني.
As for the experience of the revolution, this experience I lived and experienced myself through all of it. In a lot of the scenes, I lived them in reality, and I think they appeared in the novel in a real way. For instance, the name of the building in the novel was Ad-Dawda, which means the loud voice, so this appeared. Some people asked me if these ideas came to you separately, and I would say yes. Yes, they came to me separately, and that will affect the texture, which some readers commented on as being not very consistent or put together, but others said it seemed very well put together, and these are different opinions I respect.
On that, picking up on that, Mohamed, someone is asking, someone from the audience is wondering if you had, as you received these ideas and these stories, if you thought at any point, given that you are such a prolific, established short story writer, if at any point, sorry, someone is asking if as you received these stories as they came to you, if at any point they appeared to you as short stories before the possibility of a novel was conceived, or was it always clear that this is information to being a novel?
سؤال ياسمين عن التتابع الذي حصلت أو الذي توصلت إلى فكرة كتابة من خلاله. هل دائما ظهرت هذه القصص بشكل منفصل فكرت بها كمجموعة قصصية، أم دائما بدت لك كأنها رواية وأنك سوف تكتب رواية؟
It looks frozen.
Yeah.
I think he's... Well, let me ask Robin in the meantime, till it comes back. I mean, everyone wants to know about this question of censorship, the official reaction, and you're very good at translating these books that have a very quiet, if intense, political undertone. I mean, in this, the revolution is in the background, obviously, like Yusuf Raha. I mean, is that this is coming into the English, but in the Arabic, in this case, was there response? Is there, fear that this, or has one thought about what this might do, having the English out, or
I think? I mean, I see the question there. I think Mohamed is back.
Yes, I'm back. I'm sorry.
I would just quickly say that those books you mentioned, The Crocodiles by Yusuf Raha, for example, this book as well, the political aspects of them don't seem to pose a problem.
Mm-hmm. Everything is a problem.
It is, but today, when they came out, for example, when the Tamasih came out,
right,
Yusuf Raha, it was not a book like that. I mean, its politics and its structure were too complex. I mean, no one was going to read that.
True. That's the point. The form, the structure.
No one's going to be able to read, I would imagine, Iflat al-Asabi' and think. Because truly, it's a book which is a question I would keep to the end for you as well, and for Mohamed, that I'm interested about, is the idea of this book resolving itself, because structurally it gives you resolution. It explains itself, the plot, it explains what's happened, what's going on with the stories, but it is not a resolution that is, you said it felt freeing, but I would say it definitely doesn't feel comforting. And I think the reality, the strands and the state of confusion you initially pass through, by the time you understand how they've been operating, you're not freed from them. And you're not freed from that confusion or the possibility of it recurring. It's a novel about, to me, it often felt like a novel about control and lack of control above anything else. But anyway, that's what I would say about the politics of it, without getting sort of too deep into it. My guess would be these books are not ones that, for that reason alone, are particularly problematic in the ways that you've mentioned, but one never knows.
What's the point? Okay. انت سمعت؟
انا دلوقتي سامعك بس انا I missed your question. I'm sorry.
هو كان في سؤالين from the audience. أول سؤال كان بالنسبة أنت يعني بتحكي إن يعني the ideas come to you فهل كان في أي وقت فكرت يعني أو المشروع كان a series of short stories قبل ما بقى a novel، ولا هو يعني it was clear من الأول إن هي رواية؟
لا هو كان it's novel from the first.
Okay.
Yes. هو كان رواية من الأول. ما كانش في أي لحظة قصص قصيرة خالص. أنا عارف إن بعض القراء حسوا كده بسبب تعدد الشخصيات وتجارب الشخصيات. بس لا هو طول الوقت كان رواية، ما كانش قصص خالص.
I said that half in English, half in Arabic. That was my question, just because we lost Mohamed. Bernadette's question about whether at any point Mohamed had considered this as short stories, but no, when he received it, it was clear to him from the get-go that it was a novel. And the other question, just because Mohamed had dropped out, was the question of the reaction, the political reaction, official reaction of the Arabic. لو كان في أي يعني
ردود الفعل، ما كانت ردود الفعل في العالم العربي حول ردود الفعل السياسية والرسمية
حول الرواية؟
نعم.
بس علشان يكون في ردود فعل رسمية أو كذا لازم تكون الرواية very popular، يعني
لازم تكون رواية
بيست سيلر، لازم تكون منتشرة جدا، ساعتها تبدأ تظهر ردود فعل. بس إذا هي رواية بالأساس عند قراء الأدب يعني، وإذا كانت مش سهلة القراءة اوكي ما بيخافوش منها.
So in order for a novel to receive official and governmental responses, it has to be a bestseller. But this novel is restricted in some ways to literature readers, and it's a difficult read, so it hasn't received that kind of reaction.
Yeah, it's not good.
I mean, it's, earlier when we were saying about the influences or the references, I noticed that there are a lot of references to magic realism, and that genre. To me, I didn't actually, when I say Latin America, I was thinking more of Borges, Bolaño, some of them, younger writers in that slightly elliptical form, like Alejandro Zambra, who I love. It's very, very different to him. His novels are very spare, stripped down, but there's something about how you brilliantly loop everything together, that I think of.
نعم، سؤال ياسمين عن كان حول تريد أن توضح المرجعيات بالنسبة للواقعية الخيالية في أمريكا اللاتينية. هي كانت في الواقع تشير إلى الكتاب الأصغر عمراً أو الأحداث، وكيف أن الأحداث مثل بورخيس، كيف أن الأحداث تتوالى مع بعضها البعض لتكشف نعم عمقا معينا، فأرادت أن توضح ذلك.
It's a beautiful book. I mean, I feel for, it's really, I'm going to go back and read everything I have not read. B, I can't wait for the next book. It's a brilliant novel. I mean, for our audience, I really feel that Mohamed has taken, even though, as Robin pointed out, there are, the literary references or similarities of writers that we admire from here. It really, I feel it's its own thing. B, the writers that I think of who have written such, elliptical, skillful works for me or span the globe. And I feel Mohamed's slipping really fits in that international literary canon. I don't want to just tie it down to Egypt at all. I feel it's on a very different level. It's beautifully written, beautifully translated, Robin. Beautifully translated.
We're glad you enjoyed it. But I just thinking about what you said, that it's more like a text you read. It's very where you see things surface in it suddenly, and you maybe you almost want to grasp onto them and see a similarity, that he just touches on a lot of things without ever being beholden to a style or getting trapped in it. So you will have a passage that is detailed and sort of like overtly satirical, and then suddenly he'll have a sentence that will just open up like a flower and just be very poetic and very sort of expansive and open, even a short sentence, and really redolent. And then it'll close up and he'll go somewhere else. And that's it. It's very hard to define, in that way too.
Absolutely. And also you touch on, obviously the revolution is there, but also not really there, and so brilliantly there, but not there. I mean, I feel that you speak for a lot of what certainly I've been feeling, and the difficulty of coming out of all that. But without, not overtly, nothing is overdone. You're not burdening us with anything. I feel you're giving us a lot of options to then to go.
كانت بعض تعليقات روبن وياسمين حول طبيعة النص، وكيف أن النص يظهر لك بعض التفاصيل التي تود أن تلمسها وتود فعلا أن تتمعن بها، يلمس كثير من القضايا التي تهم. في بعض الأحيان هنالك فقرات طويلة ممتعة وتظهر لك جملة فجأة كمثل الوردة المتفتحة. وأشارت ياسمين كذلك إلى كيفية أنك لا تشرف كثيرا في الشرح، وإنما تعطي القارئ ليلمس بعض الأمور بنفسه، وذلك طبعا من جمالية النص. أتمنى أن أكون تطرقت لذلك بشكل أو بآخر.
Robin, someone wants to know what the star in your t-shirt is.
The star? Oh, I was hoping maybe it'd be out of shot. No, I mean, it's a Pakistan cricket jumper. So this says Pakistan.
Nice.
It's my fanboy jumper. My long stand. Appreciate Pakistani fast bowlers. That's it. Yeah.
Oh, we've gone over time, I know. I don't know if there are any more questions, comments, Robin, Mohamed, audience.
Well, speaking, I feel like I could sort of talk about the book forever, but maybe because it's hard to get down to it, it's a pleasure to talk about. And I'm just very grateful to Mohamed for letting me translate it. It was a huge pleasure for me, and I'm very grateful for that Two Lines took it. And I think
I'm very lucky to have you translate it. Really.
Oh, this is lovely.
Yes,
but what you said, Mohamed, you said you're surprised this book was taken and translated, and I think it's wonderful that Two Lines took a book of this nature, which it is perhaps not only, as Yasmine said at the beginning, is it you don't often see. Well, you do maybe see Egyptian literature in translation, but not so much. And a book of this nature, less less frequently still. And they stayed true to it, and it was a really extraordinary experience producing it, and a rare one, based on my own limited experience. It was wonderful.
And it's out today I'm sorry, I've always Brookline.
Yes.
Brookline.
Yep.
It's in your bookstore, correct?
Exactly. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Our lovely audience and such incredible questions and thoughtful comments. It is available today. This is the book. I have the galley, but we have a lovely finished copies. It includes the lovely interview that we were talking about earlier. And pick it up today at your local independent bookstore. It does not have to be us, although we certainly appreciate it. So thank you all for coming out. I don't want to keep you much longer. It is past midnight for 3 of you already. But thank you, Robin, Yasmine, and Mohamed. And thank you so much, Afaf, for interpreting tonight.
Thank you, Afaf.
Okay, Afaf.
Really amazing.
Nice meeting you.
So much, and congratulations to Mohamed and Robin. I'm so happy this book is in the world. It deserves to be.
Oh, thank you, Yasmine. Yeah, thank you very much.
Sorry, someone is asking if it might be an audiobook, which is an interesting question.
I do not know. But we can, I've got your name, Susan. We can get back to you about that. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night all. Good night all. Sleep
Bye, Robin. Bye, Afaf. Bye, Yasmine.
Bye, take care.
Thank you, Rafael. Thank you so much.